There have been headlines about the pension system, especially KRS, moving forward finally.
Yeah.
You know, we're one of the worst funded pension systems in the country, but after more funding going towards the systems because of the legislature and the governor and some reforms we made in 2013, it looks like the ship is finally starting to turn around.
A little bit, yes.
So what does this mean for KRS and the Kentucky teachers' retirement system in the coming years? Does that show a need to continue to reform or kind of let things be?
Yeah, I think you're going to need continued reforms. So the reforms that happened in 2013 changed the structure of Tier 3 employees coming into the system for KRS. You're starting to see that change, plus obviously adequate funding, which is the only governor to ever fully fund the pension system in Kentucky. And I urge people that are watching or listening to this to remember that and let that sink in. He's the only one. He's put more money in three years than the Beshear administration did in 8 years. So he's an individual who's been fully committed to that, knows how to fix that problem. But because those Tier 3 employees were changed as to how that did, you're starting to see that change. It finally had some positive cash flow in the KRS non-hazardous. They're projecting, again, a lot of it will depend on the market, but to go from 13 to 19% funding for next year. The teachers, however, did not have those reforms that were done in 2013. And what you've seen is all that adequate funding that came in, and they still had a $300 million negative cash flow in their system, which is a bad omen for the future. Now their funding's around 57%. That isn't very good. I mean, people think, well, compared to 13, it's better than 13. But traditionally, anything below 80, that system fails. So they need to have much, much more. We put in, again, more than anyone before, the only governor to put in all that funding, and despite that, they still had a negative cash flow. That needs to be changed. The only way you're going to change that is going to be with structural changes going forward. And again, I think you'll probably see some proposals from the General Assembly in the near future that will likely re-propose structural changes for new teachers coming into the system. I think without it, you're not going to be able to see the system survive.
And talking about how much more money the state has been putting toward pensions, and I know from this week the Public Pension Oversight Board met, and KTRS, the teacher system, is going to ask for even more money again, which they both continue to do so because, you know, to continue to right this ship. But tax reform that you all did this past year has seen some improvements. We saw a surplus, you know, we're seeing some growth because of it, but the consensus forecasting group also kind of was skeptical about the years moving forward. The growth wouldn't be quite as good. So does tax reform 2.0 need to come up in 2020, and what does that look like?
Yeah, I think so. That's still to be debated. Obviously, the governor wants to be very aggressive and get as much as he can get done, and wants to get it done quickly. I've talked to some members of the House who are interested in being aggressive also, maybe even putting in automatic triggers for the future. But I think what you're going to see is what Tennessee did Tennessee decades ago did these changes, and they've reaped the benefits now, where they saw a gradual reduction of income taxes, a gradual increase of consumption-based taxes. So you saw some of those consumption-based taxes pass a couple of years ago. I think you're going to see other things added to that. It might be services. It might just be an increase in sales tax. I think the governor wants to get rid of the death tax, which is why people, when they retire, they leave. You know, if you're a farmer and you have property, you can't pass it on to your family. Those are the kind of things he wants to resolve. Also give an opportunity for people, instead of making their wealth here in Kentucky and going to Florida and taking all your wealth with you there, stay here in Kentucky and let that wealth continue to work here in our state. It'll attract more people. So I think you're going to see a gradual reduction in production-based taxes. You're going to see a gradual increase in consumption-based taxes, and you'll see us effectively do that over several years. I would envision every couple of years to gradually do that. It would be fun to do it in one fell swoop. Kansas did that, almost went bankrupt when they did that. And so we don't want to have it be along those lines. We want it to be gradual, the system can adapt to it. And I think as you do that, we'll become much more competitive with states even like North Carolina or Indiana or Ohio to our north. And it'll attract that much more business to Kentucky. But I think you'll see it'll occur gradually, and it needs to happen. I think if we don't do it, we're going to wallow behind. But again, we did it with 1% reduction. We saw a surplus in our budget, and we're hopefully going to see even more. We'll see what the projections will be for the next budget cycle to see if we have more revenues there that might help the state. But I think clearly this is the proper path. I think it's clear to all that's involved.
So aside from being lieutenant governor candidate and a state senator, you're also a doctor.
I am, yeah.
So one of the biggest issues in Kentucky right now is the opioid crisis.
Yeah.
The state is really taking it seriously at this point, but what, as a doctor, do you think needs to be done to actually really address the opioid crisis? How can we really get to the middle of it, and what legislative changes can be done?
Yeah, that's a big question. And I tell people it's a bucket with 50 holes. We've plugged a few, but it's still leaking water. It's going to continue. So we've seen some numbers improve. I mean, with the things we've already gotten accomplished, we've seen a reduction in deaths, which is great. I think a lot of the drugs right now, at least according to our law enforcement, is switching more towards back to methamphetamines, and a lot of issues being pushed on that. Part of it, I think you're seeing the medical community already embracing changes in how they approach pain treatment. Even talking to some of our trauma surgeons, Dr. Chang at the University of Kentucky, who's a fine doctor, and he's a great voice for the university there, that they're starting to change how they treat acute pain treatments for people that go through trauma. I mean, major car wrecks, massive surgeries. They're using IV Tylenol, ibuprofen for post-operative pain, where they've traditionally used morphine, and trying to get away from people getting hooked that way. So we're seeing that. We've improved how to dispose of our narcotics as well, educating the public about the risks. I have more patients now who say, don't start me on something addictive, I don't want to get hooked. So it's starting to sink in, and I think it's going to be a generational change. It'll probably take us 20, 30 years to see us hopefully reverse the trend on that. There is a place for opiates, obviously, and some people need them. But you want to not use that for chronic pain control, use it more for acute pain control. And we've seen some changes in the law for our physicians. We've been talking to our Board of Nursing about making some of those same adjustments as we have more nurse practitioners to make sure they're educated in that same pathway to understand the risks, and start to get all of our providers to start clamping down on how much narcotics they put out there. But I think it's a matter of education. It's kind of like tobacco use. It was rampant. We've had a lot of education. We're seeing numbers gradually reduce as a result of that. I think the same thing needs to happen with opiates. And just respecting that these are not just simple pills that are like an over-the-counter medicine. These have high risk with them. You use them only when you really need them, and not to use them otherwise. But it's going to take a combined effort from our churches, from our community leaders, from our political leaders, the business community, giving people that are going through substance abuse treatment now, that have gotten out the other side of it and they're in remission, to help educate others because they've gone through it, they know what to expect. And to start making more treatment options available. I think there's a lot of gaps that have to be filled. There are good groups like the Fletcher group that's coming forward now, trying to find that people, once they get out of rehab, they need support from that point moving forward. They get put back out, dumped into the pool, and they don't know how to swim yet. They're going to relapse and have more problems. So providing support and destigmatizing those who are really trying to better themselves. Most folks are really good people, come from good families. They got stuck into opiate addiction through something that may have been beyond their control sometimes, and they find themselves stuck in a situation they want to get out of. To destigmatize that, let our employers give an opportunity, and give these folks a second chance.
Another big issue being talked about right now, especially that has to do with money, is infrastructure funding. Maybe raising the gas tax in order to generate more money for the road fund. It's kind of one of those issues, which we've seen a lot of in the last couple of years, of the House says, I'm not touching it if the Senate's not touching it, and
Sure.
the other way around.
Right.
But the governor obviously wants to get that done. And it's important the state is starting to lose money in terms of the road fund, and we have a lot of need. So do you think it could get done in 2020, especially with a huge budget, pension issues, taxes? Do you think it's something that can get done, and what do you want to see done?
It can get done. It's going to be difficult to get it done. I mean, I'm a Republican. We run on not raising taxes. We don't like to raise taxes, but we're losing a lot of federal toll credits, hundreds of millions of dollars in federal toll credits. We'll probably see 30% of our road budget go away if we don't do something. When we compare our road taxes to neighboring states, let's say like Indiana, I think that's a 41 cent per gallon tax. We have about 26. Ohio just recently raised their taxes, a lot of it on trucking and diesel and that kind of thing, but I think about a 14-cent increase in road tax. I know most people bristle at the thought of that. So as a freestanding measure, it'll be very difficult to get that passed. If it's part of a larger package, I think there might be an opportunity for success there. I've told people I'm totally open to other concepts and ideas. If people think, hey, just spend less, that sounds great. Well, there's tons of deferred maintenance that's happened over the years. We have a major bridge in northern Kentucky, another major bridge in western Kentucky that need repairs, that over 10% of our gross domestic product crosses over those bridges every day. There's lots of different ideas on what we can do to help fund some of that. The feds are going to help us with some of those funds. Ohio is willing to help us with some of those funds, but we still have to find another way of providing the revenue for that. So in 2002, I think we did do a large bond, and we devoted some of the current gas tax monies, I think 2.5 or 2.7 cents, towards paying off that bond, and that's just now here coming to fruition. But again, we need billions of dollars for infrastructure. That's part of the problem. And I think we've trimmed back. The governor's put in a plan through the SHIFT plan that kind of allows monies to go where they should go based on need. They've tried different methods of resurfacing roads through partial milling, and so they've done things to help with reduction of costs. But the fact of the matter is that all those costs have increased through inflation over the years, and we've got to find a way to fund it. So I think we're open to other ideas and concepts. But as we start getting big employers like Amazon and Prime Air, we start looking at, in Meade County, we have Nucor, Brady Industries. They're going to need roads to get their product out as well. And in northern Kentucky, there's a lot of growth. We need areas for infrastructure to provide growth for housing and for more commercial growth up there. So if we want those things there, we've got to provide the framework for it. The governor's fully conscious of that. I think he's got ideas on how to get that done. But it'll have to be part of a larger measure. I think it can get done. It's just always difficult. And I think a lot of our local officials are going to have to help us lead on that and express the need and sell their communities on the importance of getting more funding to get our roads up.
Okay, so I could talk policy all day, but I won't continue
Sure.
to pepper you with questions. But what do you feel are some of the biggest policy issues that need to be addressed next year or the next 4 years if you're part of the Bevan administration? And is there anything else we haven't covered about the election or policy that you want people to understand?
Yeah, and I think I think we're going to have to continue. Again, the tax reform is still a major issue. This is a governor who sells this state better than any other governor ever has. So it's going to be a continued economic development and is selling the Commonwealth for what it needs to be and preparing the state where people want to come and live and invest. So we need to have more, we need that. I think it's going to be taxation, infrastructure, business development. I think we're going to have continued pension reforms. There's still a lot of work to be done in that realm. If you can imagine the amount of money we'll be putting into the pensions this year, which it may go up from where it was, $3.2 billion in the last system, it might be upwards of $4 billion, which is almost 20% of our budget. If that money could be used for other things, there would be an opportunity. So the sooner we get that problem resolved, the sooner we can start addressing other needs in the state. So I think all those things are important. I think also we start talking about, again, we've seen bills like sanctuary cities, which we're going to hopefully get that passed coming forward. And again, I think it's just Kentucky being a leader on business fronts. We also want to do continued foster and adoption reforms for our kids, to give our children an opportunity to find homes to live in, to take care of our children, to change the culture that we're seeing of anger and violence from a lot of folks, and start being responsive to that, I think, as parents and as families and as churches. So we'll be working on a lot of those things as well. But I think we want to continue to go forward. I think Kentuckians understand Kentucky is moving in the right direction. We're better off than we were 4 years ago. Do you want to go backwards to old-fashioned kind of sour politics and pay-for-play politics and corruption, or do you want to keep going forward where the state has a chance to grow? That's what we want to push in Kentucky, and I think people understand that. And ultimately, when they go to the ballot box, I think that's what's going to drive them to support us in November. So we're looking forward to the future for Kentucky.